Thomas E. Woods Jr., author of Who Killed the Constitution, shares his knowledge of American history.
The federal judge had said, is it your understanding of the Constitution that it limits the power of Congress, it limits the power of the judiciary, but it does not limit the executive? And the Assistant Attorney General replied, that is how we read the Constitution. Now that, as horrifying as it is pretty typical of our situation today, and yet those words were not uttered in 2008. They were uttered in 1952 in the presidential tenure of Harry Truman. Our problems go back beyond George W. Bush. We've had one president after another who has been responsible for crimes against the Constitution. Barack Obama, as my friend Charles Goyette just said, Barack Obama's no change. He can't promise he's going to get the troops out of Iraq. He'll do his best, but he can't make any promises. And he's not going to get the troops out of the other 129 countries because he says that would be to fall into isolationism. Where do they find these people? And by the way, look at who's in Obama's foreign policy team.
Let's see.
Everybody's yelling at suggestions. You're all right, but the one I want to pick is Madeleine Albright. You remember her? She's the former Secretary of State who in the 1990s, when Leslie Stahl asked her, what do you think about the fact that the sanctions on Iraq have killed 500,000 children? What do you think of that? And she said, we believe the price has been worth it. That's the big change we're getting? What a scam.
Naomi Wolf, author of The End of America, A Letter of Warning to a Young Patriot, discusses 10 steps to fascism.
What I want to say before I get into the 10 steps is that he is so right. He is so right. I'm now realizing more and more. Democrat, Republican, environmentalist, militarist, gay, straight, black, white. The Constitution is more important than any of it.
Jack McLam, military veteran, retired police officer, and radio talk show host, discusses the threat of martial law.
Questions, and then they'd have a written interview that had about 10 pages you had to fill out, all about your moral character. And if you are of high moral character, they washed you out. They didn't hire you because of Officer Jack McLam raising such hell in the police department against tyranny and treason, you know. Sad, very sad. I have some great police officer friends that are still on board, but they were Christians and they were high moral character when they came in. It's just the problem is they don't get promoted. What we found out in law enforcement that was a part of this martial law scenario, when I was still on the force, we had a program going on where the most evil, the most criminal, the most unconstitutional officers were promoted up through the ranks to the top levels of government. And the same in the judgeships. The same in the judgeships in Phoenix. We watched and watched and we saw the most evil, the most corrupt prosecutors, lawyers promoted up to judgeship. If you were willing to shoot your mother for a nickel and take bets on which way she'd fall, you could become a judge in America. Because that's the ones they wanted. They wanted criminal judges, they wanted criminal police chiefs, criminal FBI agents, criminal CIA agents, DIA agents and everything, because the criminals run this government. The criminals at the top don't want to get prosecuted, so they figured the best thing to do is promote criminal judges and criminal law enforcement people so that they're as much a criminal as the criminals at the very top of this system. So that's the system we have today. And we need to take it back. We need to take it back. And we're going to take it back. We have 30,000 ministers today, 30,000 alleged Christian ministers. I call them government ministers because they got all these government licenses and they only preach 30% of the Holy Bible because the other 70% will get the IRS sent in on them to take their tax-free status away from them. So they're only preaching 30% of the Bible, but they have 30,000 now that have signed on to a federal program to convince, under martial law, when they put us under martial law, to convince your church members to turn in your guns and be good little Christians and do everything the evil government tells you to do. 30,000 and growing. That list is growing today. You need to talk to your minister and see if they've signed on to that program. They've been told to tell the people to obey everything evil government tells us to do because all government's of God. And that's a lie out of the pits of hell. It's not true. Amen.
Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, discusses the threat to U.S. sovereignty in the New World Order.
The correspondence between Adams and Jefferson. And some years ago I read that book, and one phrase from Jefferson in a letter just leaped out at me and described so much of what we're facing today. Jefferson said to Adams, "The issue today is the same as it has been throughout history. Shall man be allowed to govern himself, or shall he be ruled by a small elite?"
The Trans-Texas Corridor and the widespread proliferation of toll roads, particularly through the use of these public-private partnerships, to exploit the eminent domain powers of government and join it with the financial self-interest of private corporations, is about to befall not only Texas, but our entire country. More than 23 states have passed legislation to allow them to hand over our infrastructure to foreign companies in monopolistic sweetheart deals. It is nothing more than an all-out assault on our freedom. The freedom to travel, the freedom to own private property, the freedom from oppressive taxation and overbearing government. And that, my friends, is tyranny. Though not easily conquered, it can and must be crushed. The NAFTA superhighway, known as the Trans-Texas Corridor to Texans, called a myth by those trying to silence the truth, is very real and even has some segments under construction today. It is a 4,000-mile multimodal network of toll roads, rail lines, utilities, telecommunications, and pipelines of all sorts. It will be up to 1,200 feet wide and the biggest land grab in Texas and U.S. history, taking 580,000 acres.
Terry Hall, founder and director of TexasTurf.org, discusses the Transcontinental Corridor.
Movement to stop the Trans-Texas Corridor, the NAFTA superhighways, to stop tolls across Texas and America, preserve our private property rights, our way of life, and our precious freedoms bought with a price from those who came before us. They who have sold us out and sold out those who are in favor of American freedom so that they could sell out to the almighty dollar in the intoxication of their own power, aren't counting on you and me and this freedom movement taking our government back.
Of these men and women, they are a mortal threat to the American people and all they have built here in North America over the last 232 years. And no one, may I say, has done more to alert his countrymen to this danger than the soft-spoken gentleman from Texas, Dr. Ron Paul.
Michael Schur, 22-year veteran of the CIA and best-selling author of Imperial Hubris, discusses problems with U.S. foreign policy.
And their journals provoked a hubristic war based on the idiot idea that a state could be created in Muslim Iraq that was not anti-Israeli. These men severely and permanently compromised Israel's security from the moment the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq began. Moreover, it is not a fixable situation because a potentially pro-Israel regime in Iraq exists only in the ahistorical and fervid imaginings of U.S. citizen Israeli firsters, who are, when all is said and done, Israel's worst and most lethal enemies. The cost of unqualified U.S. support for Israel has heretofore been measured in the expenditures of dollars and political capital, and as such has been acquiesced in or ignored by Americans, inured to their government's prodigal waste of national assets. We have now transitioned into a situation where the cost of such support for Israel is being measured in the blood and lives of the children of American parents.